Emily Cross thought her biggest secret was her pregnancy until Tyler Hart vanished, and every clue pointed back to the one person she trusted least, her own mother. Emily Cross had always been the kind of girl people overlooked without meaning to. She kept to herself, stayed out of trouble, and moved through life quietly, as if trying not to take up too much space. Her small lakeside town liked people like her, predictable, polite, and easy to explain. No one ever wondered what Emily might be hiding, and that was exactly how she survived. Beneath her calm exterior, she was carrying a secret that grew heavier every day. At 17, she was pregnant, and almost no one knew. She had rehearsed 100 ways to tell her mother, but every imagined conversation ended the same way, with Dana Cross's temper boiling over like it always did when life veered off her carefully planned path. To the outside world, Dana was a hard-working single mother who had raised Emily on her own after Emily's father died when she was still a toddler. People described Dana as strong, proud, and dedicated, but at home, her strength often slipped into control, and her dedication sometimes felt more like pressure. Emily learned early to keep her thoughts to herself, especially the ones that might upset her mother's balance. When she discovered she was pregnant, she had panicked, not because she feared the responsibility, but because she feared the disappointment in Dana's eyes. It was a look that stung more deeply than any shouted words. The only person who knew the truth was Tyler Hart. Tyler was nothing like the boys who hung around the gas station or bragged about things they barely understood. He had a gentle confidence that made people trust him instantly. He fixed up old bikes, volunteered at the marina, and talked about joining the Coast Guard someday. With Tyler, Emily felt safe enough to dream about a life beyond the walls of their small house. When she told him about the baby, he had promised without hesitation that he would stay, support her, and figure out everything step by step. That promise became the only solid thing she clung to. But then Tyler disappeared. At first, Emily tried to stay calm. Teenagers left town sometimes, chasing opportunities or running from problems. But Tyler wasn't the type to vanish without a word. He wasn't the type to abandon a promise, especially one as serious as theirs. Each day without him brought a new wave of dread she couldn't explain. She checked her phone constantly, rereading old messages because there were no new ones. She walked past the marina hoping someone had seen him. She even pretended to believe the rumors that he had left for a job out of town. But deep inside, something colder and heavier settled in her chest. What scared her most wasn't Tyler's disappearance, it was her mother's reaction to it. Dana barely acknowledged the news. She acted as if Tyler had never been important, as if his absence didn't matter at all. Her indifference felt wrong, almost unnatural. Emily noticed the tension in Dana's shoulders each time his name came up, the way she quickly changed the subject, the way she kept the house quieter than usual as if afraid of disturbing something unseen. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that her mother knew something she wasn't saying. And as the days went by, that suspicion grew into a fear she wasn't ready to face. The days after Tyler's disappearance blended together in a confusing blur, each one filled with the same uneasy routine. Emily woke up every morning hoping for a message or a missed call, anything that might explain why he had vanished so suddenly. But her phone stayed silent. His social media accounts didn't update. His friends hadn't heard from him. Even the marina, where he spent half his time, reported that he hadn't shown up since the previous week. People in town started to trade theories, but none of them felt right to Emily. Tyler wasn't impulsive, and he wasn't running from anything. If he had gone somewhere, he would have told her. As her worrying grew, so did the strange behavior around her home. Emily couldn't ignore the subtle changes in her mother's routine. Dana began staying up later than usual, pacing the hallway when she thought Emily was asleep. She cleaned the house obsessively, scrubbing corners that normally didn't bother her and rinsing out buckets long after midnight. Emily tried to convince herself it was just stress, but the timing felt too sharp, too connected to Tyler's disappearance to be coincidence. The basement door was the first thing that truly unsettled her. It had always been unlocked, sometimes even left ajar because Dana used the basement for storage. But now it stayed sealed with a brand new lock, the kind of heavy-duty type someone installed when they wanted to keep something out or hide something inside. When Emily asked about it, Dana brushed off the question, saying the basement steps were getting unsafe. She didn't sound angry, just distant, almost rehearsed. That uneasy tone lingered long after the conversation ended. Emily tried to distract herself by attending school, but the whispers followed her. Some students claimed they saw Tyler hitchhiking on the highway. Others insisted he'd been planning to move away for months. None of it matched the person she knew. She found herself drifting through classes without paying attention, replaying every moment she and Tyler had shared in the weeks before he vanished. The more she remembered, the more she sensed an invisible thread tying his disappearance to her own home. Whenever Emily walked into a room unexpectedly, Dana stiffened. Sometimes she would quickly close a drawer or shove something into a jacket pocket. Her phone, once left on the counter or coffee table, was never out of reach now. Emily noticed her mother checking the windows more often, glancing outside as if watching for someone who might return. The tension in the house grew thicker, almost suffocating. Despite her fear, Emily kept searching for answers. She retraced Tyler's usual walking routes, hoping for a clue he might have dropped or someone who might have seen him. Yet every path she took ended the same way, a dead end and more questions. She even considered reaching out to the police, but her age and her mother's likely reaction held her back. At night, she lay awake listening to the quiet creaks of the house. Each sound felt loaded with meaning. She sensed that something had shifted in her world, something she couldn't yet see but could feel tightening around her like a silent warning. Tyler was missing, her mother was acting strange, and every instinct in her body whispered the same message. Whatever had happened, it wasn't an accident. Emily's search for answers began quietly, almost timidly, as though she feared her own curiosity might uncover something she wasn't ready to face. At first, she tried to focus on small details, things she could explain away if they turned out to be nothing. But the more she looked, the more she found pieces that didn't fit together. It started with the muddy boot print near the back door. She noticed it early one morning while getting ready for school. The print was deep and smeared, clearly left by someone who had stepped in wet soil. The problem was that the yard had been dry for days, and neither she nor her mother had gone outside the night before. Emily crouched down, staring at the pattern until her nerves prickled. It wasn't her shoe size, and it definitely wasn't her mother's. A few days later, she discovered a torn strip of fabric lodged behind the washing machine. She recognized the color instantly, Tyler's favorite hoodie, the one he wore almost every time they met. She held the fabric in her hand, expecting to feel some kind of relief, as if finding it meant he had been nearby. Instead, dread crawled through her. How could a piece of his clothing end up hidden in her house? Her first thought was that he had stopped by while she was asleep, but the idea didn't sit right. Tyler would never sneak around her home without telling her. Something else had happened, something she didn't yet understand. The next clue was more alarming. While searching for a charger in a drawer Dana rarely used, Emily found a crumpled receipt from a hardware store. It listed cleaning agents, heavy-duty gloves, and a replacement lock. The date on the receipt matched the night after Tyler disappeared. Emily stared at the paper until her hands began to shake. It didn't make sense. Dana wasn't the type to fix things around the house, and she certainly didn't need industrial cleaning supplies. The connection between the items and the strange tension in the house was becoming impossible to ignore. Emily's unease grew when she examined the new lock on the basement door more closely. The wood around the lock was splintered, as if someone had forced it shut in a hurry. She traced the jagged edges with her fingertips, imagining scenarios she didn't want to believe. Her mother had always kept the house tidy and predictable, never the type to hide areas behind locked doors. Now the basement felt like a forbidden place, and the silence behind it was heavy and unsettling. Her biggest discovery came by accident. While looking for a pencil in Dana's toolbox, Emily found a phone placed beneath a layer of old screwdrivers. The phone was battered but still functional. She recognized it immediately. It was Tyler's. A wave of nausea rolled through her as she powered it on, but the screen held nothing helpful. All texts had been erased, calls wiped clean. Only one photo remained, a single image taken in her backyard on the night he disappeared. Tyler stood in the dark, the porch light faint behind him, as if he had been waiting for someone. Emily clutched the phone, her pulse drumming in her ears. The clues were no longer scattered coincidences. They were pieces of a story forming in front of her, pointing to a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to see. Whatever had happened to Tyler had happened close to home, far closer than she ever imagined. Emily knew she couldn't ignore the growing list of strange discoveries any longer. The phone alone was enough to unsettle her, but the photo of Tyler standing in her own backyard made everything feel unbearably close. She tried to imagine a harmless explanation, yet every possibility collapsed the moment she remembered her mother's sudden fixation on keeping doors locked and floors spotless. Something was wrong, and Emily felt it tightening around her each passing day. The turning point came when she decided to explore the edges of their property, a place she rarely visited. Beyond the backyard, past a line of overgrown bushes, stood an old shed that had been there since before she was born. It leaned slightly to one side, its roof sagging and its wooden boards warped from years of neglect. Dana had always dismissed it as unsafe, warning Emily to stay away from it since she was a child. Back then, the caution never felt unusual, now it felt strategic. Emily approached the shed cautiously, moving through tall grass that brushed against her knees. The air smelled damp, as if rain had fallen recently even though the sky had been clear. When she reached the door, she noticed it didn't sit evenly on its hinges. A faint line of dust outlined the edges, except for one spot where it had been disturbed. Someone had been here, and not long ago. She pushed the door open gently. It made a low, tired creak that echoed inside the small space. Dust swirled in the beam of sunlight that slipped through a gap in the roof. At first glance, the shed looked empty, just old tools, a rusted lawnmower, and boxes filled with forgotten odds and ends. But as her eyes adjusted, she noticed signs that didn't match the shed's long abandonment. A set of boards lay broken near the back wall, as if someone had fallen or been pushed against them. A glove lay crumpled on the ground beside them. Emily picked it up and found the fabric stiff, as though it had been used recently. She felt her pulse quicken as she examined the dent on the metal wall behind the broken boards. It wasn't huge, but it was deep enough to suggest force. She thought about Tyler, about the photo taken in the backyard, and about the basement door that suddenly needed a lock. The pieces were lining up in a pattern she didn't want to see. The shed didn't hold anything undeniably incriminating, but it held enough to tell her that something serious had happened here, something her mother had tried to cover up. A chilling realization washed over her. Tyler must have come to the house that night, probably intending to talk to Dana or explain the pregnancy. Maybe he felt responsible for clearing the air before things got worse. But whatever conversation he expected had clearly gone wrong. Emily imagined the tension, the anger, the sharp words that tended to erupt whenever Dana felt cornered. She didn't want to picture anything beyond that, but the evidence whispered that the confrontation had escalated in a way no one intended. Emily left the shed feeling hollow, as if the truth had seeped into her bones. She didn't have concrete proof of what happened, but she knew enough. Her mother's strange behavior, the new lock, the cleaning supplies, the hidden phone, and now the shed, each clue pointed to a terrible conclusion. By the time she returned to the house, Emily understood she couldn't stay silent any longer. The weight of the truth was too heavy, and the safety of her future child pushed her toward the only decision she could make. She needed help, and she needed it now, even if it meant shattering the fragile remains of her family. Emily made the call with trembling hands, standing outside where the cold air helped steady her breathing. She didn't know exactly what to say, only that she needed someone who could take the weight of the truth off her shoulders. When she explained that her boyfriend was missing and she had found items linking him to her home, the officer on the other end asked calm questions and assured her that someone would be sent to speak with her. Even though fear tangled with guilt, Emily felt a faint sense of relief. Whatever happened next, she wasn't carrying this alone anymore. Investigators arrived later that afternoon. Their presence filled the house with a quiet tension that left no room for denial. They walked through each room carefully, paying close attention to the basement door and the shed behind the property. Emily watched from the living room sofa, her hands resting protectively over her stomach, while Dana stood rigid near the kitchen counter. Her mother looked confused at first, then irritated, and finally unsettled as she realized their visit wasn't routine. Emily avoided her eyes, afraid of what she might see there. The officers asked Dana a series of questions about Tyler's disappearance. When he was last seen, whether he had ever visited their home, what she had been doing the night he vanished. At first, Dana responded coolly, almost dismissively, as if the whole situation was an inconvenience she wanted to be over with. But as the questions became more specific, her composure began to crack. Emily could hear the shift in Dana's voice, the small tremor she tried to hide. It was the sound of someone realizing that loose ends were unraveling. By evening, investigators had gathered enough inconsistencies in Dana's statements to request a full search of the property. Emily watched as they unlocked the basement and descended into the dark space she had been barred from for weeks. She couldn't see what they were doing, but she could hear soft movements, the scrape of boxes being shifted, the low murmur of voices. When the officers returned upstairs, their expressions were sober. Whatever they found was enough to continue digging deeper. Hours later, after collecting evidence from both the basement and the shed, they asked Dana to come with them for further questioning. Her reaction was a mixture of panic and anger directed at everyone but herself. She insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that the officers were wasting their time, that Emily had misinterpreted everything. But her words lacked conviction. The fear in her voice was louder than the excuses she tried to build around herself. Emily stood silently as her mother was escorted out the front door. She felt no satisfaction, only a heavy sadness. She didn't want any of this. She had never imagined her life unraveling like this, with Tyler gone and her mother at the center of something unthinkable. Still, she knew she had done what was necessary. Protecting her child meant facing truths she would have preferred to avoid. In the days that followed, everything moved with the slow, steady rhythm of an unfolding investigation. Forensic teams returned to the property. Interviews continued. Eventually, enough evidence surfaced to confirm that a confrontation had taken place, one that ended with Tyler losing his life. Dana admitted the truth during questioning, explaining that fear and anger had overtaken her. She claimed she hadn't meant for things to escalate, but her confession aligned with everything Emily had pieced together on her own. When the charges were finally filed, Emily felt an unexpected calm. It wasn't relief, exactly, but the sense that the worst parts of the storm had passed. The town reacted with shock, offering quiet support without prying into details. Emily moved in with relatives who welcomed her without hesitation. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to breathe deeply. The months ahead were filled with gentle routines and days spent preparing for her baby's arrival. She still thought of Tyler often, letting his memory guide her when fear crept in. When her baby was born, she held the tiny child in her arms and felt a fierce determination rise inside her. She would create a life built on honesty, even if it meant carrying the weight of the past alone. Emily didn't try to erase what happened. Instead, she carried it with quiet strength, knowing that survival wasn't about forgetting, but about moving forward despite the things that had tried to break her. Her story became one of resilience, proof that even in the darkest circumstances, hope could still take root and grow.